Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know, we do this every day, Monday through Friday. Every morning we release a new video talking about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports, football, basketball, recruiting, just like we do right there at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. This is the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Everything going on in Pitt sports, you're going to find it right there at Panther-Lair.com. And then we kind of carry all of that and all the conversations that we're having on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. We carry it over to this, the Morning Pitt, which we release every day, Monday through Friday, every morning on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have other things we do on our YouTube channel, of course. There's the Panther-Lair show. We did that last night at 8:30. That's a live show that you can tune in for and comment and ask questions using the chat screen, which is always kind of fun. We have sort of a discussion, a back and forth. And then we do our post-game show, which we'll do on Saturday after the Virginia Tech game. We do one after every game. We go live no matter what time it is. So there's been a couple primetime games so far this season, West Virginia and Georgia Tech. And the result is that we've been going live around, I don't know what time, usually around 1:30, somewhere around there in the morning. But it's fun, and we get a lot of people tuning in and commenting, and it's a good place to talk about the game after it happens. And so we do a lot right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And we kind of follow the topics of the day, sort of whatever's going on, whatever's on my mind, and whatever there is to talk about. If there's news or something to discuss, that's what we discuss. So obviously a lot of the focus this week has been on the aftermath of Pitt's loss to Georgia Tech on Saturday. A really bad loss. I think any way you slice it, it was a bad loss. No matter what Pat Narduzzi says about the quality of Georgia Tech's team. And I mean, they think they've got quality players and all that, but the reality is it's a terrible loss. And we've talked about that a lot. We talked about it the last 3 days, and we've written a lot about it on Panther-Lair.com. I'm currently working on the 321 column that'll come out tomorrow. You can read that for free at Panther-Lair.com. And that whole thing, we're writing about the offense. We're talking about the defense and the special teams like we talked about on yesterday's Morning Pitt. We're talking about all those topics. But lost amidst that loss or sort of tucked in amidst that loss is something we haven't really gotten a chance to talk about yet, and we should have, because it happened on Saturday. It happened earlier in the day before the game kicked off. The Pitt basketball got another commitment. We haven't really had a chance to talk about this, but we should, because it's pretty notable, it's pretty relevant, and it definitely merits our attention. So the commitment came from Jaland Lowe. He's a point guard he's a guard, we should say. He's listed as a shooting guard in the Rivals.com database, the number 31 shooting guard prospect in the class of 2023. Class of 2023 is guys who are they're seniors now, so they'll be freshmen in college next fall. And that's what Jaland Lowe is. He's a guard prospect. He's the number 116 prospect overall nationally. He's a 4-star recruit. Commits to Pitt over, offers and interest from, George Mason, Memphis, Oklahoma State, Rice, SMU, Texas Tech, VCU, Washington State, Wichita State. Good programs, successful programs, tournament programs that, for the most part, are sort of perennial NCAA tournament teams. And so you got to like the competition that you beat there, and then you also have to like the star rating. Like I say, Jaland Lowe is a 4-star prospect. That gives Pitt 2 4-star prospects in their class of 3. Carlton Carrington, the guard from Baltimore, is the other one. And then Marlon Barnes from the Cleveland area. The forward is actually a 3-star prospect. When he committed to Pitt, he was a 4-star, but he hasn't necessarily progressed the way they expected him to when they gave him that 4-star ranking. So he's been bumped to a 3. A little while ago. I think at the end of the summer is when that happened. But nevertheless, and we'll get into that in a second. Nevertheless, Pitt's recruiting class right now, the class of 2023, again, the guys who are coming in to be freshmen next year, is ranked in the top 15 nationally and number 2 in the ACC. And that's pretty impressive. The number 1 recruiting class in the ACC right now is Duke, who has 5 5-star prospects. And while there's something to be said about quantity impacting the team rankings, because when Rivals.com ranks team recruiting classes, it's a cumulative point system. Depending on your star ranking and your Rivals rating, and where you are in the top 150 or wherever it is, you get bonus points. It all adds up to points, and then the teams are ranked according to their points. Now, if you have 6 commitments right now, you could have 6 2-star commitments right now, and your class will likely be rated higher than a class that has, 1 5-star, just because of the way that team rankings formula works. Now, usually by the end of the recruiting cycle, these things tend to balance out. Schools recruit at different pace. Some schools get guys sooner, some schools get guys later, and it can be kind of jumbled up in that way. And you don't want to put too much into saying, well, they have the number 2 class in the ACC right now, when it doesn't exactly balance out that way, or it might not balance out that way once all the schools get full recruiting classes. But I'll say this, 3 recruits in the class is not that much. It is more than anybody else other than Duke, so Pitt definitely benefits from that. But when you look at having 3 recruits in their class, they have 2 4-star prospects. Louisville has 2 4-star prospects. Virginia has 2 4-star prospects. And that's it. No one else has that many 4-star prospects. Now, Duke has 5 5-stars, which is very impressive. It's about as good as you're going to get. North Carolina only has 1 commitment, and that's a 5-star. But nobody else has multiple 4-star prospects. So, I mean, even if you want to say, well, it's quantity-based, let's see how the quantity looks, or it's quantity-based, let's see how the quality looks. You take Duke's class and Carolina's class because they have 5-star guys, but then after that, you're talking about Pitt, Louisville, and Virginia as the only other schools in the ACC right now with multiple 4-star commitments. I think even if you want to kind of split hairs here or get into the technicalities of the rankings process, Pitt's got a pretty good class. Pitt's got a really good class. Pitt's got a class that, by the rankings, looks like it's one of Jeff Capel's best, if not his best, outright since coming to Pitt. And it's really impressive to see Capel in that position. And I'm going to bring someone in here in a minute who's going to talk a little bit more about this. Rob Cassidy, the Rivals.com national basketball recruiting analyst, is going to join us to talk about Jaland Lowe, talk about Carlton, Carrington, and Marlon Barnes. We're going to talk about Dior Johnson, and we're going to talk about Pitt recruiting overall. And what an important point that Rob makes, and I'm going to sort of emphasize this right now, and because I think it bears sort of double emphasis. I don't think it's any secret that Capel's in if not a make or break season, it's whatever the step before the make or break season is. And he might be in that make or break season. He might be on that proverbial hot seat. And if he's not, like I say, he's one step before those things. And when you're in that position, the Capel's in, and I think when you're in the position that the Pitt basketball program's in right now, where you look at where they are, what the last few seasons have been, and maybe what the immediate future looks like, it's not always easy to recruit at a high level. And that goes for transfers coming in this year, as well as recruits in the next recruiting class. And Capel, I think, has done a pretty admirable job on both fronts of getting transfers to come in right now, guys who had options, who decided to come in and help this team, contribute to this team, and then the recruits of Carlton, Carrington, and Marlon Barnes, and Jaland Lowe. Not to mention Dior Johnson, who we got in the last class. And it's impressive. I think it's a testament to the efforts of Jeff Capel and his coaching staff. I think they've been able to sell not just the promise of a better future, but themselves. Because I think sometimes we'll look at a situation like this and say, how did they sell these kids on the prospect of what the future is going to bring? How did they sell them on it when you look at what the results have been in the recent past? And I don't know if coaches, I mean, they obviously have to address that kind of thing in recruiting. They have to talk about, look, we're going to get better because of this or that. We have this guy, we have that guy. But I think Jeff Capel really wants to sell himself. And I think he sticks to selling himself, selling the university, selling the family and support system of the basketball program, selling the city of Pittsburgh. But most of all, that connection with him. I think that's his main recruiting, his main recruiting tool, his main recruiting angle. And I think it connects with a lot of kids. It obviously doesn't always connect. I mean, Pitt fans can very quickly rattle off all the names of guys that Pitt got close with, but wasn't able to land. But I think you look over the last year and a half or so, And I think you would say, I mean, maybe not even year and a half, maybe just look over the last 6 months and you would say, okay, coming out of, maybe some of the darkest depths this program has experienced under Jeff Capel, which I think is what you would say the end of this past season and the immediate offseason, at least the start of the offseason, were some of the darkest depths under Capel. He's managed to do some of his best work. I mean, getting Nelly Cummings, I think, was a big add. Getting Dior Johnson was a big score. Getting these 3 commitments that they've got right now, I think Barnes was already committed, but getting Carrington and now Lowe to if not fill out this recruiting class, but to lay a really strong foundation for it. It's impressive stuff. And I thought it was impressive. That was my opinion, but I want to get some outside opinion too. So I'm going to bring in Rob Cassidy. Rob's the national basketball analyst, recruiting analyst for Rivals.com. He's got his eye on the whole country, and he's lived in different places, but he actually just recently moved to Pittsburgh. He's now a local guy and pretty excited about being here. So, fun conversation here, and I think you'll enjoy. I hope you'll enjoy it because Rob likes a lot of what he sees out of this recruiting class, out of the land with Dior Johnson, and out of what he sees out of Pitt recruiting overall right now. So let's bring him in. Rivals.com national basketball recruiting analyst Rob Cassidy. And Rob, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. I definitely want to catch up with you after Pitt getting a commitment last week, and they have, we can talk about recruiting rankings and all that. But first of all, I mean, you're a national basketball analyst, but you're actually local to us. When you moved to Pittsburgh, what, in the last 3 months or something? When did you move out?
Yeah, I've been here about 2 months so far, okay. And I love it. It's a wonderful, I feel like, and I have no ties to this place, none at all. We just kind of went through the recruiting motions really and visited some places, and we went to Fort Collins, Colorado, and we thought maybe Kansas City, and then we came here and fell in love with it, and here I am from a basement in Lawrenceville coming live to you.
Well, Lawrenceville, that's definitely one of those neighborhoods on the rise. I mean, there's a lot of restaurants in there. Where have you found good to eat in Lawrenceville?
There's a Japanese place right down the street from me called Umami that I really like. I've been there 4 times already, and I've been here 3 months almost, but no, it's great. It's real walkable, and I feel like people that have never been here or aren't familiar with the city don't really know how cool it is. I feel like it gets lumped in with Cleveland sometimes, and that is just completely unfair. It's a Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's a Rust Belt thing, and I mean, you watch NFL games on Sundays, and you watch the Steeler games. They still show steel mills and molten iron and all this stuff.
Well, listen, that was jarring. The way that this town feels about the Steelers is not a normal, listen, I lived in Kansas City for a while and they like the Chiefs, but they don't like the Chiefs like this. Yeah. It feels almost like a college town. The atmosphere on game day is crazy. It's people parading by my house to 30 people in Steelers jerseys at 8 a.m. I'm like, guys, the game isn't until 1.
Right. Yeah, and at halftime when they changed the quarterback, the entire city erupted. So it was, I think I heard people cheering out their windows and stuff the other day. So that was, yeah, you're getting a good indoctrination to what Pittsburgh sports fans are really like, in addition to a 100-loss season by the Pirates. So,
It's great. The bar across the street from my house isn't normally opened on Sundays, but it isn't during football season. And they set up a grill outside, and then they give the free boost. You go there, and apparently if you're a regular there, they just give you whatever you normally order and pay for free because they don't have the license to charge you. So it's nuts. It's just a bunch of regulars drinking free booze and eating ribs at a dive bar. I love it. I can't get enough of it.
It's fantastic. Well, welcome to Pittsburgh. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're enjoying the city as much as the rest of us do. Now down to brass tacks. This Pitt recruiting class, they got Jaland Lowe, 4-star guard, over the weekend. That's their 3rd commitment in the class. Put some, I was just looking at the team rankings. They're in the top 15 nationally. They're number 14 nationally, number 2 in the ACC behind Duke, who obviously they put together a pretty good recruiting class. I don't know, 5 stars seems pretty good. And there's a quantity thing that goes into the team rankings. But overall, when you look at this Pitt recruiting class, what kind of jumps out to you, and what's sort of your overall impressions of the job that Jeff Capel and his group have done so far?
Well, it's amazing when you consider the macro circumstances, right? It could be circumstance because the transfer portal kind of helps these coaches that are a little bit on the hot seat. But usually it is very, very hard to recruit at this level when everybody knows that if you have another bad season, things could get dicey, but they've done spectacularly. And, I think coaches in that kind of position that Jeff is in now have kind of gotten a little bit of a bump in recruiting because, and I don't think a lot of people think about this, it's easier now to do this because the transfer portal and the one-time exemption does exist. So you can point out, even if somebody's really cares that much about in the future, say, look, you got a one-time transfer. If things go wrong for you and me here, you can go elsewhere. And also, name, image, and likeness has helped that too. Where before that, if you had one of these seasons where it was do or die, or at least it seemed like it was, trying to get players of that caliber to come to your school was near impossible. So it's interesting to see how well they've recruited, considering the wall that they seem to be up against. And I think it's impressive.
So let's talk about Jaland Lowe, 4-star guard. I think he's number 31 shooting guard in the country. He's a 4-star prospect, top 150 kid out of Texas. What stands out to you about Jaland Lowe? Why do we have him as a 4-star, and what do you think where do you think he projects at the next level?
He's a steady kid. He's the son of a coach. His dad, he played for Houston Hoops. His dad is a longtime grassroots AAU coach, pretty well known. And you can kind of tell that, he's been coached. He is polished. He's a decent enough shooter where if you leave him open on the perimeter, he's going to knock it down. He's not going to take over a game making contested threes or whatever, but he does a little bit of everything very, very well. You have to be cognizant of him, like I said, on the perimeter, because he will knock down a three. He's got great pace. He doesn't get rattled off the ball. You're not going to bump him too much or speed him up, just because he is the son of a coach. And, he can play either guard spot. If you're in a pinch, you can put him at the point. I think he's probably better off the ball right now. And, he'll get better defensively because, he's not the tallest guard in the class, but he does have long arms and it gives him a little bit of versatility. He's willing to defend. I don't think he's quite there yet as far as being a high-level defender, but the effort's there. So that's kind of encouraging.
And then the other guard in the class is Carlton Carrington, guy from, Maryland, Baltimore area, another guard, like I said, and maybe, I guess, I'll put it to you of how do you see those two guys sort of meshing? What do you see out of Carrington, and how do you see him sort of fitting with Lowe in the backcourt?
Carrington was never a guy that kind of blew me away with his scoring until this year, and we raised him in the rankings because of it. He was great at Peach Jam, playing for Team Mello. Became a much better shooter. He's always been a really good defender because he has the length that he can guard multiple positions. He's always been pretty good passer. He's not a guy that's going to throw the ball away a lot, turn the ball over. But he's always kind of struggled to take over game scoring. And I thought he took some big strides this year against some pretty good competition at Peach Jam, where he showed that he can stay at toe-to-toe with other big-time kids and score the ball in multiple ways. He's pretty athletic. I wouldn't say he's going to blow you away with that athleticism, but he's good enough. And the jump shot has come a long ways, So I think the skill sets do kind of merge a little bit where they fill in each other's. They're not perfectly complementary players, but they do fill in each other's gaps quite well, I think.
Like you said, he sort of made a jump over the summer. I think a lot of people, like all over the country, were like, whoa, look at this guy. First of all, is he a guy you could see his recruitment continuing to blow up as we come up to November to that early signing period? And second of all, how sort of interested are you to see how he builds on the summer season into, his high school season this winter?
It's going to be interesting because the trajectory is so good for him. At the beginning of the summer, he was kind of known as a guy that's going to defend, and whatever you get offensively from him is kind of a bonus. And now it's like, okay, now he can score and he's going to defend. You've kind of got to get him into a more facilitation role, I think, and make him learn how to make the people around him better. That's kind of the next step for him, I think, because the size is there and the jumper is coming and the defense is always there. And if you can defend, you can stay on the floor at Pitt. I feel he'll go ahead. No, please, continue. I completely forgot what I was going to say now anyway.
Geez, that was going to be the best part, and I completely cut it off. No, I was gonna move on to Marlon Barnes then, Pitt's first commitment in this class, and when he committed, he was a 4-star guy, and I think fans are always kind of interested in what goes into the rankings changes. We talked about Carrington getting bumped up. Barnes took a step down to 3-star ranking now. What kind of went into that adjustment, and what do you like in his game? What holes do you kind of see or where do you think he needs to improve?
It's always interesting with these early kids. I had I say a conversation, to put it nicely, with the father of a prospect that is not Barnes this weekend when I ran into him in Texas about why his kid dropped in the rankings. And it's such a projection where if you have some tools when you're young, we will rank you high thinking the skill set will follow. It's hard to deny his length and everything else when you're talking about Barnes. He's got a pretty good basketball IQ, and it's like, okay, the offense is going to come. Defends well. He's a versatile guy on the defensive end. The offense never really came as far as we thought it would. And as you get older, it becomes a little bit harder to keep you ranked high on potential, and then you have to rank again on production at some point. And finding that balance is tough. And you see it a lot when we look at, you look at a guy like Amani Bates, who was number one forever, ranked on potential, and the production never came, so we had to drop him. it's such a give and take because it's so subjective. Is this kid ranked on potential or production? And there has to be a balance. And I think in Barnes' case, he just never really came around offensively, because that's usually, if you've got a big kid that can move well as he does, he's agile, he's got length, and he defends, and he does a lot of things really well, the last thing that usually comes is the jump shot. So you can kind of take a shot on a kid like that. But at some point, if it doesn't come, he starts to slide. And that's kind of what I think we've seen here. I think he's still got potential to be a great player. We haven't completely quit on him, but he hasn't developed at the scope that we'd hoped, I guess. That's what.
Right. Do you, side digression here, but when it comes to the rankings process, this is probably a conversation we've all had many times over the years, but would it be better to wait until a guy is a junior, or is that just part of it?
Listen, I would love to. I would love to wait to rank them as juniors. I would love. Trust me. I have had this conversation so many times. I do not make those decisions. And the thing is, we all blame each other. I'm sure the people sitting over the other services are like, well, Rivals ranks their class early, we have to do it. But that's kind of the excuse I get when I complain too. It's like, oh, they're ranking them, you got to do it. So if we can have a meeting of the minds and all decide we're not going to do this until their junior year, I think it would be beneficial. Because you get into these situations where it's like, you rank a kid that hasn't played a game of his sophomore year, and then maybe he's number 30 in the country. He's a 6'4" wing, and then he never grows. And then what? Then you've got a guy that isn't that doesn't really have a place to play on the court. And you've got him ranked high, and then you have to drop him. And if he's committed by then it's a whole explanation of that fan base, and it's what you sign up for when you sign up for the job. But if it was up to me, if it was RobCassidy.com, I wouldn't rank them until they were juniors.
I guess it's more of a case of a guy, not necessarily a guy getting worse, although there are times where guys play falls off, but you're ranking the potential, freshman and sophomore year. And it's just, if you don't live up to that potential, you got to readjust. And colleges do it.
It's harder. Right? It's harder in basketball. Take it from me as somebody that's been on both sides of this. In football, the explosiveness and the speed and everything else really isn't going to change. In basketball, it's like, all right, this guy's got to learn to shoot. And a lot of times they do, but sometimes they don't. And if you can't shoot the basketball, it's hard to be a good basketball player. So it's more difficult to project, I think, long-term basketball than it is football.
Well, speaking of guys who have high projections, and we'll move from the 2023 class back to 2022, Dior Johnson, who obviously had a long, interesting path through high school. He doesn't really want to talk about that path very much anymore.
No, I wouldn't either.
He's ready to move on. Jeff Capel, we talked to him a week or two ago. He's ready to move on. The long and short of it is he ends up at Pitt. He's a 4-star guard, a guy who's considered one of the best prospects in the class, and he ends up at Pitt through a variety of ways. And Jeff Capel actually called it, he said he fell into our lap. And then, which I think is probably a pretty good way to put it. But what were your observations of Dior, going through high school, setting aside, and maybe you can't set aside all the stuff of changing schools all the time, but just in terms of talent, what he does on the court, what were your impressions of him? How did you project him coming out of high school?
The school changes do not bother me. What bothers me with him sometimes is what comes along with the school changes, where he is one of these kids where you can go and watch him and you can think that is a top 10 player in this class, undeniably. And the next day you can go and watch him, and it is very clear that he does not care. It's a Jekyll and Hyde situation when he's engaged and he is got his head there where it's supposed to be, and he's playing, and he's not throwing the ball in the stands, and he's not distracted. He's a pretty darn good player. When things aren't going so well, it tends to snowball on Dior, where he gets pretty mad at himself, and then it goes south. And I've seen probably equal parts, A and B. So we kind of split the difference on his ranking. And I think if Capel and company can get him focused in on basketball and get him to kind of stop spiraling with one little thing goes wrong and stop, one turnover leads to 6. If they can somehow get him to have a shorter memory and focus on basketball, I think he can be a tremendous, tremendous player at Pitt with a pro upside. If they fail to do that, things could get very frustrating. And I simply, I'll quote Bill Durham, sometimes I just don't know which way it's going to go. And I don't. I have no idea. Right. And I hope the best for the kid. I hope it works out, because he's a talent. And, he's athletic, and he gets up and down the court, and he can shoot it. And he does so many things when he's going well that can wow you. And he's very fun to watch when he's going well. That I hope it gets leveled out, because, I'd love to see him have a great career.
The interesting thing to watch will be Pitt has 3 6th-year senior guards and a 5th-year senior guard. So they've got this, I think, my guess is what the coaching staff is hoping is that those veteran guards are going to mentor him and help him learn how to kind of manage that. You know what I mean? Like
that, and that might be what he needs, because I mean, this is a kid who was always the alpha on every team he's ever played on, right? Like nobody was really, and a lot of coaches even sometimes weren't gonna tell him what needed to be said, you know?
Right.
So maybe if he does have if he has a veteran that's willing to be like, look, man, this isn't going to cut it here. Maybe it will get him more focused on basketball and straightened out, and he can be the player that I think he can definitely be.
Yeah. Last thing on Dior, and last thing with you, Rob, like a player comp. I mean, is there someone, Dior at his best? Who's the guy that comes to mind, college pro, that you would kind of compare him to on the court?
It's tough. I don't really, at his best, man, you don't want to I hate doing this, because it's like, I want to throw out an NBA name. So I'm going to pass on doing this, but let's just say that at his best, he can be a type of dude that I think could be a lottery pick. I think that he has that in him. I don't want to compare him to the guy that I'm thinking right now, because it's so outrageous. I don't want it to come. I don't want somebody to play this clip for me for 3 years and be like, look, but
it's going to happen when he has 6 turnovers in the first ACC game. Yeah. Rob Cassidy said he was a lottery. So you've already
and he could be a lottery pick, but he also could be a guy that could turn the ball 6 times and get benched. He's one of these guys that there's a handful of guys around the country this year that I think is must see television. And he's one of them, just because I want to see which way it goes. And the other one is the kid at Texas, Dylan, what's his name? Damn, kid from Florida. I just ranked him. He's out of my head. But I think he's a top athlete in the class too. And he's just not there offensively yet. And there are just certain kids that intrigue me. And Dior is one of them, just because he's so unpredictable.
For sure. All right, Rob. Well, thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. Great insight on these guys, and great coverage, of course, on the Rivals national basketball team. And like I say, welcome to Pittsburgh. Glad you're enjoying it, and maybe we'll see you at a Pitt game at some point this winter.
Listen, if I would have known about it, I probably would have moved here 5 years ago when I was trying to get to Miami the first time. But no, I love it. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Rob. Thanks to Rob for joining us. I thought that was great stuff there. I mean, first of all, it's great that he's excited to be in Pittsburgh. We always like adding people to our to the city, right? But kind of going to some of the last stuff first. I thought his comments on Dior Johnson were really interesting. And I mean, first of all, he says that he's, a guy that it will be, worth the price of admission to watch, that he's really interested to see how this freshman season of college basketball goes for Dior Johnson. Count me in that group as well. Now, I don't have as much firsthand experience of Dior Johnson or with Dior Johnson as Rob does, but count me in the group that's really interested to see what happens here. And I think that, some of the angles he talked about of Dior Johnson being mercurial, and sort of 50-50 on what you're going to get, and not really being sure of what you're going to get, and that if you get the good, it's really, really good. Like lottery pick level good is the kind of caliber of player we're talking about here, the talent level. But if he gets frustrated, if he loses interest, if he has an off night, you could run into some real trouble. And so that's going to be fascinating to watch just from the start right there of what Dior Johnson you're going to get in any given game or any given half or whatever it is. But then the influence of Nelly Cummings, Jamarius Burton, Greg Elliott, Nike Sabandi. I mean, I think those guys, especially Cummings and Burton, I think are going to be so important to Dior Johnson's development, to his maturity, to how he handles the college game. And I keep coming back to this thought I've had, and this will be something that's either confirmed or one way or the other, only in hindsight. I mean, we won't know until we find out. But I keep having this thought that as we talk about the journey of Dior Johnson and all this stuff of Dior Johnson and everything he's been through, all the places he's been, all the different schools and all this stuff, right? There's this thought that I have, and I think the Pitt coaches share this, and I think people around Pitt are, either believe it's going to happen or hope it's going to happen, and probably a little bit of both, that all of that experience to land at Pitt with Jeff Capel has sort of refocused him. That he's come into Pitt, and I think if you watch the video interview we did with him a few weeks ago, I think you probably got this impression as well. I know I did. That he came into Pitt very focused on business, on doing what he needs to do. That he came in because he came in to win, he came in to develop, and he came in to make himself into a pro. And maybe all the experience of the last 4 years of bouncing around to the different schools and his reputation and what people were saying about him and this and that, maybe it's all led him to sort of grow up a little bit and just want some stability, want something he can count on, want people he can count on, want people who believe in him, people he can believe in, and believe that they'll take care of him and have his best interest at heart, and sort of just give him some solid ground to work from, I should say. And so I'm really interested to see how Dior Johnson adapts to this environment and adapts to the program and adapts to being part of Pitt basketball, playing college basketball here. And I think those guys like Nelly Cummings and Jamarius Burton are going to help that transition so much. John Hughley, too. And when we talk about the veteran guards, but John Hughley has truly emerged as a leader for this team. And we talked a lot about it. We talked about it a lot in the offseason with the recruiting and the transfers and all of that. We really got into it talking about how involved Hughley was, because we kept hearing that, Hughley was trying to be Jerry West out there or something, trying to be LeBron, putting together the team himself. And Jeff Capel said, yeah, Hughley was doing it. Jamarius Burton was doing it. These guys they would read about transfers and they would look at the film. They'd send it to the coaches and say, hey, we need to go get this guy. We need to go get that guy. That's a sign of leadership. That's a sign of engagement. That's a sign of involvement that you need. You need players who are that committed to the program. And John Hughley showed that he is. As the player who is at least entering the season as Pitt's best player and most important piece, to have him committed at that level, I mean, that seems only good. It doesn't seem like there's much, if any, downside to that. So it's just going to be really interesting to watch. And so, if you have a guy like Dior Johnson, if he starts to get into some of those frustrations or struggles, having the veteran guards around him, having John Hughley around him, should be able to keep him focused and engaged, and keep him, just help him grow, I think, and mature. And so it's gonna be interesting to watch. I mean, there's that meme of Leonardo DiCaprio from Django Unchained, where he says, you had my curiosity, now you have my attention. They have my attention, and I think they have a lot of people's attention. I think people who are paying attention to Pitt basketball right now would say the same thing, that as they added this piece or that piece, you have my curiosity, but then you add in Dior Johnson, and then you show some of the recruiting success that they've had, over the summer. You've got my attention now. I'm really curious. My attention is very much honed on what this team is going to do, and we'll find out soon. First exhibition game's coming up, I think on the 22nd is the date. I shouldn't say that without looking it up, but I mean, it's coming up. Things are, the season is quickly approaching. Before you know it, it's going to be the end of November, and they're going to be playing regular season basketball games. And I'm looking forward to it. I really am looking forward to it, maybe more than recent years, because I'm interested to see, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, or maybe last week it was, this approach of having this veteran backcourt with all these guards who have been around for a long time. We haven't seen a roster like this. We haven't seen Jeff Capel work with a roster like this. Maybe this will be the one that works. We'll find out. But thanks again to Rob Cassidy from Rivals.com, the Rivals.com national basketball recruiting analyst, for joining us for insight on Pitt's 2023 recruiting class, talking about Dior Johnson, talking about living in Pittsburgh, talking about Pitt's overall recruiting efforts so far in the class of 2023. I thought it was great insight from Rob. Make sure you check out his stuff. Keep an eye on it on Rivals.com. Of course, keep an eye right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where we release the Morning Pitt every day. What am I talking about? Every week. Every day, Monday through Friday, we have a new Morning Pitt episode that comes out. Click that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you always get alerts sent to your phone whenever we release a new Morning Pitt episode, or when we go live for the Panther-Lair show on Wednesday nights, or we go live for the post-game show after the games on Saturdays. You'll get a notification if you turn on the alerts, so that will keep you posted on what we're up to. Like this video. We appreciate that as well. Subscribe and like, right? Those are the things that good YouTubers are supposed to ask people to do. I'm trying to be a good YouTuber. Don't think I'm there yet. Gonna keep trying. And so do us a solid and like and subscribe. And then make sure you stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for checking in today. Thanks to Rob Cassidy for joining us. We'll be back with the Friday edition of the Morning Pit tomorrow morning and get you ready, everything you need to know heading into Pitt, Virginia Tech on Saturday at Acrisure Stadium. So look for that. Hope you've had a great week so far. Hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll talk to you Friday morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.